We got breaking news. Don Lemon arrested.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Sekulow. We want to hear from you. Share and post your comments or call 1-800-684-3110. And now your host, Logan Sekulow.
Welcome to Sekulow. We've got a packed show. It is Friday. We're live, so I want to make sure you have an opportunity to call in. If we could open up those lines, open up the phone lines for you at 1-800-684-3110. That's it, 1-800-684-3110. Do we have phone lines?
We should.
Down?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Let's make sure we open those up for people to call in. Okay, I'm not sure. We'll figure that out. Don Lemon has some breaking news. Don Lemon has been arrested. That's right. Journalist Don Lemon, who stormed that church with the protesters, who went in, who got in the face of that pastor, has now been arrested. This happened last night in his hotel, around 11 o'clock last night, I believe, in Los Angeles, as he was preparing for the Grammy Awards, which are this weekend. Opens up a whole host of questions. Of course, last week we learned that a judge said he was not going to be, but that changed, obviously, and the federal government has made some arrests. Now, again, I think we need to take a step back. My big concern about this is making Don Lemon into some kind of superstar for the left. Because do I think Don Lemon, do I think he's a big threat to anyone? Yeah, likely not. In fact, I think he was a pretty irrelevant person, an irrelevant source of news, an irrelevant source of broadcasting for many years now. And he said, make me the next Jimmy Kimmel. Essentially, make me that martyr, if you will. And it looks like that is headed to happen. And that is my concern when something like this happens. Not the consequences shouldn't be upon someone. Look, if he deserves to be arrested, he deserves to be arrested, and so on and so on. But my concern is that we make this kind of moment the focus and not actually focus on the real concerns of what's going on in Minnesota. And all of a sudden you now have created a superstar out of Don Lemon. Not something that I would like to happen, as he has not been very kind to us in the past, because I think this is absolutely what he wanted to happen. Could you imagine a grander scale for it to happen also in your Los Angeles hotel, the weekend of the Grammys that you're there to cover, and they're there arresting a journalist? Now, look, did he get in the face of that pastor? Absolutely. Do I think really what he said was egregious and so fundamentally wrong and misunderstanding how the First Amendment works? Absolutely. Like I said, I think he was a talking head who was pretty good at reading a teleprompter and now is given a situation where he's not. Did he go after those people and said, look at the traumatized children out there, but that is why protesters are doing this? Essentially, he said that. He wants that to happen. He wanted this disruption of the church service to happen. So I'm sure that opens the door to what the legality is. Now, do I think it's a slippery slope also when you start going after journalists? I do, because I can see when the shoe is on the other foot, and all of a sudden we are talking about the loads more of independent, conservative-leaning journalists who likely would have been in this situation. I mean, but look, a lot of them have had issues. Look at what happened with James O'Keefe and all of those issues that happened at Project Veritas. It's not unheard of in the conservative movement for someone to be arrested or to have any sort of legal ramifications.
That's right. And what we don't know right now is specifically which statute he's been charged with. There was a lot of talk of the FACE Act. We can get into that in the next segment. But what is interesting here is that, remember, they went to a federal magistrate judge in Minnesota a couple weeks back, and he was not giving them an arrest warrant to sign off on to arrest him. They appealed that decision in a kind of an unusual move to the actual district court judge and the chief judge of that, and who said basically, if you want to do this, we're not going to overturn the magistrate judge. Go impanel a grand jury. That appears to be what has happened. They impaneled a grand jury and were able to get an indictment against Don Lemon through that process. And we don't know what the charge is yet, but we have some information we can talk about in the next segment.
That's right. Give us a call, 1-800-684-3110, 1-800-684-3110. You always ask for arrests. You always ask for things to happen. Well, they happened, and how do you feel about it now? 1-800-684-3110. Support your work of the ACLJ at aclj.org. We'll be right back.
former CNN anchor Don Lemon is in police custody. This following the city's church protest in Minneapolis. Lemon is reportedly charged with conspiracy to deprive rights and with a violation of the FACE Act, interfering by force of someone's First Amendment rights.
The post from Attorney General Pam Bondi this morning. She writes, at my direction, early this morning, federal agents arrested Don Lemon, Traherne Jean Cruz, Georgia Fort, and Jamil Liddell Lundy in connection with the coordinated attack on City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota.
He's probably being charged, if I could guess, with conspiracy to violate the FACE Act.
In a statement, Don Lemon's attorney says, quote, this unprecedented attack on the First Amendment and transparent attempt to distract attention from the many crises facing this administration will not stand. Don will fight these charges vigorously and thoroughly in court.
Conspiracy to violate the FACE Act, and if he's convicted there, what penalty is he looking at?
Okay, conspiracy is an agreement to commit a crime amongst two or more people, one of whom takes a step in furtherance of the agreement. So if he agreed to commit the crime and then did nothing, but one of the others with whom he agreed took a step in furtherance, then he can be charged with conspiracy. 5 years. Conspiracy to commit the crime is generally the same punishment as the actual crime itself.
He knew exactly what they were doing. He helped them plan this and do it with them. He inserted himself as a protester. In my opinion, I don't think this is a personal vendetta at all. I think this is actually trying to protect these people who have a right to worship. The protester's First Amendment right does not trump the First Amendment right to religious practice, right? My right to scream doesn't trump that person's right to listen to their pastor give a sermon.
Welcome back to Sekulow. Like I said, phone lines are open for you at 1-800-684-3110, reporting on the news, of course, that Don Lemon, after being a part of that raid of that church that ended up in chaos in Minnesota a couple weeks back, now has been arrested, likely charged. We are still waiting all the information about it. Of course, this happened at City's Church. And you remember Don Lemon made a big point about this as he didn't just happen to be there. He was part of the group that went inside, and he went up to the pastor during the service. That's where I guess you could start really considering if he was impeding that service, what he was doing, because I do believe in a broad protection for journalists. And I know that's going to ruffle feathers. People won't love that. But I do believe that, because look, I think of myself as somewhat of a journalist and having the shoe on his other foot, going, okay, well, would they do this to me if I was attending a protest? Now, would I have gotten in the face of the pastor? Would I have been celebrating children being traumatized? Absolutely not. I think what he did was disgusting. I think what he did is abhorrent. Do I think what he did was federally illegal? I don't know. I think that that's a gray area that we should at least be open to having the conversation about. I want you to flashback here. So let's go back to that interaction between Don Lemon and the pastor in the middle of the chaos that had broken out in the church.
So the church, our church had gathered for worship, which we do every Sunday, and we were interrupted by this group of protesters. Yeah. We asked them to leave, and they obviously have not left. Yeah. So. What do you think of this? I mean, this is unacceptable. It's shameful. It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship. But there were folks who will say, I have to take care of my flock. Okay, but listen, we live in there's a constitution in the First Amendment to freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest. Yeah. We're here to worship. We're here to worship Jesus, because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world, is Jesus Christ. I want to be very respectful. Please don't push me, though. We're here to worship Jesus. Yes. That's why we're here. Yeah. Okay, that's why we're here. Okay. That's what we're about. Don't you think Jesus would be understanding and love these folks? We're about spreading the love of Jesus.
Logan, I want to actually play the follow-up to this as well, because one, I think that here is, and I agree with you to a large degree, that there is.
It's okay, you don't have to.
No. I mean, I'm going to get the people on Rumble riled up, But here we go with a situation where, yes, we here at the ACLJ are First Amendment advocates. We fight for people who want to protest or share the gospel in places that people don't want them. So we do have to look at this and be very objective about it to get to the bottom of it. And here's the problem I have, because I think journalists do have a very wide ability to report. Here's the big problem I have, and I think where he may have problems as well. Obviously, a federal grand jury believed that there was probable cause to charge him. But in that bite, the pastor is trying to get away and he's saying, I need to go take care of my congregation, and Don Lemon won't let him go. And he's trying to give hand signals like, I need to go, and Don Lemon goes, please don't push me. Already, he is trying to keep the pastor there, which is interfering with the worship service.
Sure, I can see that.
He is actively engaged in. It's not like he's in the corner filming it unfold. And if he had just gone in and filmed, there probably is less of a case against him than what I see here. And I want to play this follow-up bite as well, because I think this also is where Don Lemon goes from being someone who is reporting to someone who is participating in and continuing it. Yeah. Because this is bite 3, and this is an important bite, still continuing. After the pastor has said, I need to go take care of them, Don Lemon is still continuing to pepper him with questions. He's trying to be respectful of the pastor. But let's roll bite 3.
But did you try to talk to them as a Christian?
No one is willing to talk.
Okay.
I have to take care of my church and my family, so I asked if you actually would also leave this building.
You don't want us to chronicle what happened?
Unless you're here to worship.
I'm always worship. I'm a Christian.
We're here to worship.
Yeah.
We're here to worship. Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So that's one of the pastors of the church.
So that bite there, the pastor directly asks him, I would ask that you would leave unless you are here to worship. And Don Lemon has a cute response of, I'm always worshiping. I'm a Christian. Yeah. No, you're not. You're not there to worship. You're not there to participate in the worship service. But Don Lemon doesn't leave. He continues to go and push his microphone in the faces of other congregants. He's there for 7 more minutes inside the building, and then decides to go outside. And then we have that famous look, the kid is clearly, upset, is upsetting and traumatizing, which is the point. He is there as an activist. And yes, he may be documenting it, but he is, it's not just someone there documenting without a purpose and not engaged in. He is engaged in it the entire time. He does not leave when asked to respectfully by the pastor. It is not as if it was outside in an open area and someone said, leave our protest. It's like, well, no, I'm not going to. This is a continued disruption of the service that the pastor is trying to get under control and trying to ask people to leave. And the journalist here is refusing to also do so.
And my concern will always be if this was, again, the other side of the story, if this was a conservative reporter or someone more on the right doing the same thing, would we feel the same? And maybe you would feel the same. And that's why I'm posing that question to you. Would you feel the same if that person happened to be on your side? I don't agree with anything Don Lemon did in this. I don't agree with really anything Don Lemon has ever done or will probably ever do. I didn't think he did a good job at CNN. I think he had a lot of personal issues at CNN that obviously came up. And then I think he has done a poor job of keeping himself relevant. I think about the interview he did with Elon Musk and how inappropriate I thought that was. Now, again, I have to, though, think critically and think legally and start thinking about what the ramifications are when there is a Democrat in the White House. And that is surely to happen in our lifetime. I mean, let's just look. The pendulum moves. It has our entire lives. It goes back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. And who has been the ones who have been censored the most over the last few years? It has been those on the right. And I do always have that tinge of going, but what if? I think what he did was wrong. I think what he did is disgusting. I don't like him at all. I don't like what he had to say. But there is a concern that I personally have, even though you said, yes, he's engaging. And I agree, he's engaging. I think he's completely inappropriate and off base, even as a journalist. Do I believe he's creating a federal crime? That is where the line I'm not so sure on.
Well, when we look at what the FACE Act says, and once again, we don't know what the specific charges is. There's been some commentary. Maybe it's a conspiracy to violate the FACE Act. Maybe it is actually a FACE Act violation. But Title 18 U.S. Code Section 248 is the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances codified version of the FACE Act. And what it says is the prohibited activities is whoever, and then you jump down to subsection 2, by force or threat of force or by physical obstruction, intentionally injures, intimidates, or interferes with, or attempts to injure, intimidate, or interfere with any person lawfully exercising or seeking to exercise the First Amendment right of religious freedom at a place of worship. That's the second subsection because it says the exact same thing in section 1 about obstructing, intimidating, any of those same issues with someone trying to obtain or provide reproductive health services. It's two sides of it. One, it's to protect the abortion clinics, and then they got it codified by adding the houses of worship to it. And I think I want to go back to your analogy as well. Like, think about what would happen. Think about what would happen under typically a Democrat administration if, say, Live Action or James O'Keefe, one of those organizations, went in when not just people outside protesting an abortion clinic, but actually entered into it to disrupt the services of that. That would be a violation of the FACE Act.
I mean, you could say they did that with some of their investigation and with some of the, when they would put on a costume and wear hidden cameras.
And had meetings, right. But did they interrupt the services? That is the big question there. And I think that they would probably be charged along with the protesters that broke into the building in that case. That's a hypothetical. We'd have to see how that plays out.
Yeah,
you do have to be careful. But I think, once again, when you see him talking to the pastor in that way, not letting him go, when he's saying, I need to go take care of my congregation, it puts him in a different role from reporting to actually engaging in the activity of interfering with the worship service.
Yeah, I mean, I see your point. I think it's blurry. We have a comment come and said, come on, Logan, a conservative reporter, if they went into a leftist religious service, they'd be dragged off and jailed. That's probably correct, and I don't know, though, that that's good. That's not necessarily what we want. Now, do I think that if they went in and they were protesting and making a scene themselves that they should be? Yeah, probably. But if they were going in as just a reporter and they were just asking questions, I don't want that to be what happens, because I do believe in a very broad version of journalistic freedom. With that, we'll continue the conversation. People are saying, that it's because of the ice storm that it hit my head. Things have happened. You know what? Maybe you're right. I'm not on here defending Don Lemon. I'll say that ad nauseum. I'm here discussing the ramifications of limiting the freedom that journalists have. I want to hear from you. We're going to take some calls coming up in the next segment. Go to aclj.org for more info. The shield, if you will, that organizations like mainstream news organizations like CNN have had against defamation has been almost impenetrable. I cannot tell you the constant calls I've had over the years where someone gets very upset that lies are being spread about them through mainstream news. They call us, and Dad, half the time it feels like the conversation's got to be, sadly, there's not a whole lot we can do. Well, that may change as the ACLJ is now back in court with what could be a landmark case against the cable news network, against CNN, for perpetuating something that their organization knew to be untrue.
So Professor Dershowitz filed a lawsuit. The judge said that if there was ever a case of defamation, this was it. But the only thing standing in the way between Professor Dershowitz and justice is a Supreme Court opinion called New York Times versus Sullivan, which was in 1964, which gave media heightened protection. But the media landscape was totally different then. Now you have everybody's media. So what you've got is, as you mentioned, this impenetrable wall. We're challenging New York Times versus Sullivan. So we are now officially at the Supreme Court of the United States. And what I think is probably it is one of our biggest cases we've ever had. The implications are huge. And our ACLJ members and donors have made this possible. And it was a lot of legal work. We had 5 lawyers plus me working on this case pretty much for the last 2 months. It's been our project. So I'm excited, very pleased with the product. The other side gets to respond, then we'll respond again. And we'll probably know, end of the spring if they're going to take it or not. If they do, we will argue it next year. I'm optimistic. There are justices calling for this decision to be overturned. It's time, and we're optimistic, and I think we've got the perfect case for it.
Welcome back to Sekulow. We got a lot of calls, as expected. We're going to take them. It is a Friday, and we want to make sure that you guys have an opportunity to speak as well. But, Will, this does tie in to a lot, the arrest of Don Lemon, everything that's happening right now in Minnesota. It does tie into a lot of the work we're working on.
That's right, because today, and if you were watching on one of our streaming channels, whether it be YouTube or Rumble or Facebook, you saw a clip from a previous show when we announced the cert petition we have filed at the Supreme Court asking them to take a case that involves defamation in CNN. And the goal of that case is to try to get clarity, maybe update to a precedent called New York Times versus Sullivan, which has really built up this impenetrable wall for journalists, for media, saying that they can never really be charged with defamation because there's this intent level that has to be reached. And so for a long time, they have had a much broader, much more leeway than even other people within the First Amendment that can be sued for things like this. So this is a case, Dershowitz versus CNN, that the ACLJ brought right at the end of December. Many of you remember that, and if you saw that clip, it's really a landmark case if the Supreme Court takes it. Today is an important day in this schedule as we wait to see if the Supreme Court will take it, because today is the day that CNN's response to our cert petition is due. They don't have to file a response. If they do, then we will have a reply brief to their response due about 2 weeks from now, February 13th. However, there's many ways this could even play out. If they decide not to, and the Supreme Court's looking at this, they could compel them to respond to this. But right now, we are kind of eagerly watching the docket on the Supreme Court website to see if and when CNN's response to our cert petition is filed. This, I think, goes back to what the whole discussion is that journalists in the United States right now, especially if you are with a big organization, have these even more heightened protections. It is within the same amendment as regular freedom of speech, freedom of worship. We know this, freedom of assembly. But the freedom of the press category seems to have, whether it be through Supreme Court precedent or through other actions, this more heightened protection where normal citizens exercising their First Amendment right would not be able to just defame.
Yeah, people for so many years have called me personally when maybe a hit piece comes out on them or their family or their organization and filled with lies, filled with half-truths. And they've called me, in tears often or not sure what to do, spinning out of control because they feel like their lives are being ruined by lies. And, in any other circumstance, I'm usually able to say, well, we'll take up your case. Let's go work on it. Let's go do it. When it comes to, like Will said, the broad, almost immunity that journalists have, and that really big news organizations have, to spin a half-truth or a lie, even when they knowingly know it to be untrue, has been broadly protected. So I have to have these weird conversations where I bring a lawyer on a phone call and I kind of have to say, especially if you're a public figure, there is not much you can do. We can take this to court. It's going to cost a lot of money and a lot of years of your time, and likely you're going to lose because, as Will said, it has had this really broad sense of immunity, especially in the last decade. But that is where the ACLJ has finally had an opportunity to step in and make these adjustments to where at least they can't continue repeating known lies. And the Supreme Court hopefully will take it up and we'll have an answer. And I believe there's a good chance that we win this and we see a massive change in the way reporters are held accountable. So where I do think there is broad immunity in terms of, or there's definitely a broad scale of what freedom of journalism is, and when you're there as a journalist and covering what you need to cover, I do think there is an opportunity to limit the lies. And it's not about opinions. A lot of these are stated as facts. They're stated as just what's going on. They're never even caveated often. Or a correction comes out later on and it's buried and never seen. There's a lot that can be done in that.
That's right. And once again, I do think it ties into what we're seeing here. And we'll get to phone calls. I know lines are jammed. But I want to play this also because it ties back to the Don Lemon story, where the voicing an opinion and showing where you're at on this issue. And I think it gives you an insight into what his motives were there. But this is bite 9. This is after the fact. After we saw what happened, after he refused to leave when the pastor asked him to, he was on the I've Had It podcast and talked about what his thoughts are on that church, of which I don't know if he did any research on that church, if he knew any of the people there, but it's this casting them and defaming the people there in a wide sense. Now, he does say, I think, it's his opinion, but the ability for journalists to just feel so comfortable saying this out loud after saying, I was just there to chronicle this, is shocking. This is bite 9.
And there's a certain degree of entitlement. I think people who are, in the religious groups like that, it's not the type of Christianity that I practice, but I think that they're entitled, and that entitlement comes from a supremacy, a white supremacy. And they think that this country was built for them, that it is a Christian country, when actually we left England because we wanted religious freedom. It's religious freedom, but only if you're a Christian and only if you're a white male, pretty much. And so, yeah, I absolutely 100%, but it's an intimidation tactic. And, I said, I don't understand how I've become the face of it when I was a journalist. I do understand that I'm the biggest name there. And I'm also, as I was on with my producers this morning, you and Kylie talk all the time. My producers were saying, I said, how did I become the face of this? And my producer said, Don, you're a gay black man in America.
And once again, this is him ascribing motives for people there on a Sunday that were participating in a worship service. That is white supremacist because they were not at protests on Sunday morning. It is such a twisted, demonic mindset that he so comfortably spews that, religious groups, it's not the type of Christianity I practice. And we know that his type of Christianity is worship through journalism, I think, is what we took from the church service. But once again, he's just sitting there defaming and chastising these people on a liberal podcast by saying that they are effectively white supremacist and that they don't want others to have religious freedom. He knows nothing of the intention or the hearts of these people.
Yeah. All right, we only have about a minute left, and we do have a lot of calls, and I want to make sure we do get to you. So in the next segments, we're going to take calls. So stay on hold if you're on hold. If you're not, I don't know how many lines we have open, if any. You can give us no lines open right now. When we get to calls, you'll hear someone take a call. Usually by the time you have heard that, it's about, probably takes 20 seconds for it to get from my voice to your radio or to your stream. Line's probably open, so you can give us a call. I did want to encourage you to go to ACLJ.org. Look at the incredible content we're providing you there. Absolutely free. When you have these moments where we are going, into a current battle with CNN in courts to change this shield that they have where they can do whatever they want, you got to be a part of it. This is a big moment. So I encourage you to go to ACLJ.org. That's at ACLJ.org. If you can support the work financially, it's a great time to do it. Make a donation if you can. If not, though, subscribe on YouTube. Do something that costs you nothing. Just be a part of the team. It means a lot to us either way. Again, at ACLJ.org, though, you can get engaged, read great content, watch great content, and, of course, if you can, support the work. Second half hour coming up. Find us on ACLJ.org on all social media platforms.
Welcome to the all-new ACLJ app. Expert analysis and insight big tech can't censor. Customize your news and get real-time alerts on the issues you care about. Advocacy is now at your fingertips. Take action, make a difference. Support the causes you care about with just one tap. Be the first to know. Breaking news alerts sent straight to your inbox. Everything you need, all in one place. Stay informed, stay empowered. Download today.
We are so excited to announce the ACLJ's brand new app, completely redesigned to provide you with the best tools available to partner with us at the ACLJ. You can watch the daily Sekulow program, sign the petitions, customize your ACLJ membership experience, donate with the click of a button, and receive up-to-the-minute critical updates that the mainstream media can't censor. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to your phone's app store, search ACLJ, and click install. It's that simple.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Sekulow. And now your host, Logan Sekulow.
Welcome to Sekulow. Second half hour coming up, reporting on the breaking news that Don Lemon, that's right, former CNN broadcaster and current church disruptor, Don Lemon has been arrested. Now, we don't know all the information on what he's been charged with, but it means a grand jury decided whatever he did was worth being arrested. This happened late last night at his hotel in Los Angeles, preparing for the Grammy Awards. Opens up a slew of questions and conversations about journalists. Of course, they are arresting him because of his engagement in that church protest that happened in Minnesota. Was it 2 weeks ago at this point? Yeah. Close to 2 weeks ago. And, of course, his involvement there, where maybe it's because he was intimidating the pastor, maybe because he was getting involved more than a journalist should get involved. Again, I think that line can get a little blurry, but when I've asked you to call in, a lot of you called in. So let's go ahead and take, is it Kathy, who has been on hold the longest? Kathy, go ahead.
I am so sure that because of prayer of God's people and the situation that's going on in Minnesota, and now this with Don Lemon, as well as many other things across the country, that the prayer of God's people is being heard, and I look forward to things happening as a result of him hearing our prayers. I just encourage everybody who's listening to do the same. Thank you.
Well, and I also think, and I think it is important to point out here, one, Don Lemon wasn't the only one arrested. We had the organizers that were arrested pretty quickly after. Obviously, that is a little bit easier to get a magistrate judge to sign off on if they organize this, and it looks like a textbook case of violation of the FACE Act or deprivation of rights cases that they charge these various individuals with. But once again, I've seen on social media people be like, oh, I can't believe those people are out of jail, the ones that were arrested. Well, I can. Some were released on their own recognizance. They're not seen as a flight risk. They are not guilty. They are innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. So, no, that makes sense for what they did to be released on their own recognizance. Now, at the same time, if they were to go do that again, I am in a church, do the exact same thing. I could see a judge putting a higher bond out there, or potentially even some sort of other penalties, or keeping them in custody for a little bit longer.
Do you know if Don Lemon was kept in custody? I would assume not.
No,
right?
I don't. I assume he's been booked and released. I haven't seen news that he'll
be
out
in court.
Yet.
I think they said some point today.
Right, they'll be arraigned. But typically, with an offense like this, especially since now the definition of violent can be.
I was waiting for you to step in it.
Right, but they were non-violent. They broke the law. They interfered. They intimidated.
Like, I've had violent crime go against me, and the person gets released within a couple hours. So you know what? That's not unheard of. I don't think that's right, by the way, but that is not unheard of in this country.
But also, they will have to go to trial, and the government will have to prove their case. And that's a good thing. That's
Absolutely.
The way the judicial system works. There will be a jury in these cases that examine this and come to a decision whether or not they are guilty. And you know what? Don Lemon has one of the best lawyers in the country. Abby Lowell is defending him. So this isn't, I would say, for the government, a slam dunk case against him, even though I personally believe that he has crossed the line and is violated some laws here. It doesn't mean that he's going to even if he is guilty, a day in jail.
No, I think that's very unlikely. I think maybe there's a fine there. Maybe there's probation.
Well, nonviolent physical obstruction is a category within the penalties of the FACE Act, and that's a fine of $10,000 and not more than 6 months. I would find it hard-pressed to see him serving real time, even if he is found guilty. And I know that's going to make a lot of people mad.
Yeah, you watch his YouTube channel, though. It's probably getting that $10,000. That's probably how it's.
He's already raised.
He's already probably raised it just from conservatives hate watching it. So that's the truth. Phone lines are open for you. We're going to take more calls, 1-800-684-3110, or go to aclj.org.
Don Lemon has been arrested in connection to an anti-ICE protest at a Minnesota church.
Lemon's attorney, Abby Lowell, released a statement on Instagram, writing in part, quote, "This unprecedented attack on the First Amendment and transparent attempt to distract attention from many of the crises facing this administration will not stand. Don will fight these charges vigorously and thoroughly in court."
Attorney General Pam Bondi posting this on X, saying, "At my direction early this morning, federal agents arrested Don Lemon, Traherne Jean Cruz, Georgia Fort, and Jamil Lydell Lundy in connection with the coordinated attack on City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota."
The charges that Don Lemon faces are violations of Title 18 U.S. Code sections 241 and 248. The first charge is conspiracy to deprive of a constitutional or statutory right. The latter charge is covered by the FACE Act, which protects houses of worship and abortion clinics.
It prohibits by force or threat of force or by physical obstruction, intentional injuries, intimidates or interfere with or attempt to injure, intimidate or interfere with. So a lot of things there. Any person lawfully exercising or seeking to exercise the First Amendment right of religious freedom at a place of religious worship. This group of people, protesters, did disrupt this church service. So will this be a violation of a FACE Act?
It's pretty clear in the FACE Act that you cannot impede others' right to worship. He was embedded with and organizing with this group. He was not just following them around with a camera. In some videos, he can be heard chanting along with the protesters. He deliberately interrupted the pastor to interview him while his interview was basically him just defending the protesters interrupting this church service. And so to me, he was an active participant, and that went beyond journalism, and he became a protester and obstructed those parishioners' right to be there worshiping God.
Welcome back to Sekulow. We're going to keep taking calls on the Don Lemon arrest. Now, look, we were just watching some clips, and there are some reports that Don Lemon got, involved in the protest, was part of the chanting, was part of. At that point, you have crossed the line. You are no longer just there as a journalist. If you are actually getting involved in the protest itself, now again, I don't know what the full scope of the crime will be. As Will said, I don't think that a lot of these people will go to jail for a very long time. But I do think that maybe is where the line gets crossed. If you're just there asking questions, pushing people, even if you think, the pastor that says, I need to get back to my flock, there is adult responsibility where the pastor could just ignored him and moved on, but kept engaging with him. So, of course, you got to take that into consideration. We got to take some more calls, though. You say it was Melissa on line 3. Melissa, yes. You're on the air.
Hi. I am just so glad that Don Lemon's been arrested, for the sheer fact of the hassle, the cost, the time, the energy that's going to go into taking, or things that will be taken away from him so that he'll have to go through this process. I hope that at some point he has some enlightenment, quote unquote. I don't really know how his relationship with God is really solid based on his book and his behavior. But I'm just really glad that he has to go through the hassle of all these things, no matter what the outcome is very obvious. He stopped the pastor from doing his job. That's my comment.
I think that there is a hassle of it. There's an annoyance. Now, do I think this is what Don Lemon wanted? 100%. I can't say with 100% certainty, but he would like to be a celebrity again. He loves that we have made him a topic of conversation over the last few weeks. And not to say that he doesn't justifiably earn that, because the fact that this keeps happening. So as much as he has to go through this, the pain of being, I don't think that is what he's thinking. I think he's thinking, my name's in lights again. And look, we have represented protesters in the past. I will tell you there's a couple different versions of their personality traits. Sometimes they are that type of person. Not going to lie. Sometimes you meet one of these people that goes around and protests, even for causes that you agree with, and you may realize their personality trait is someone who wants to be arrested and see themselves on television.
Well, and I think to that point as well, the annoyance factor for Don Lemon, the hassle of going through it, his YouTube channel is live right now, and the super chats on YouTube are pouring in.
Exactly.
He is
milking it.
Probably thrilled with the reaction of his audience.
Now, don't go leave for those who are watching.
No, don't
so
go see
Will,
it.
I think, just promoted to switch the channel. He just Tony Schiavone'd it.
No, he's
here.
not even on, by the way.
Okay, he's going to say...
He has a panel of people on, probably his team.
Don't say Mankind is going to win the title. Everyone's going to flip over.
Right. Well, this is not in case anyone got that wrestling reference. That it's not the same.
You.
But there was a question that was interesting here before we go to another call, because someone said... in the chat on YouTube, Logan, why did you call Don Lemon a journalist? And I think this is where I think you and I will differ with a lot of people that are watching the broadcast, is that it is a good thing, the democratization of media and platforms and the ability to get your message out and to report on things, be independent media. I always take a little bit of an issue with people that say, if you are giving an opinion, you cannot be a journalist. I don't think the history of journalism, I've studied that. I've studied journalism.
That's not right.
I've studied the press. I have a master's in journalism. And I do think that by ignoring a very important category in media and in journalism, opinion journalism,
right,
that you shut down that entire category. You can be an opinion journalist and still have protection of the freedom of press. Now, it doesn't mean you get to violate the law in the furtherance of reporting on your opinion. I think Nicholas Shirley in Minnesota that was reporting on the assumption he had that there was widespread fraud. I think he was conducting journalism. He had an opinion about what was going on and comes from a point of view. I think that is independent journalism. Now, the difference with what he did and what happened with Don Lemon is that when he went to those, and the left was outraged about him hassling and annoying the daycare centers, he knocked on the door. And if people wouldn't talk to him, he left. When they asked him to leave, he left. When the police showed up and said, you need to leave this building, and they said, why? We're just asking questions, they left. They followed the instructions to protect their journalistic activity. That is not what Don Lemon did here. And I think he can be a bad journalist. He can be not good at journalism, and he could have violated laws here, but still be a journalist. And I think that I want to be careful with that term, that it is protected in some ways as well.
Well, yeah, because ourselves here. I wouldn't necessarily label myself in this scenario doing this show every day. I wouldn't label myself a journalist, but I certainly think that we could probably qualify for that label for a lot of people. That's a different story altogether. Now, are there more calls we want to get to right now?
Yes,
okay.
There are. We've got next
Sorry,
up.
Our phone lines are a little messed up with the computer, still with the power outage. Can you believe this? Folks, you got to also be looking at what's going on in Nashville, Tennessee. There are still members of our team who are going on almost a week with no power. So say a prayer for our team, including a lot of people. And look, this is going to be something that has to be investigated and looked at very thoroughly of what went wrong. I've only had power at my house for just a little over 24 hours. It has been pretty chaotic.
And the internet lines that's one of the reasons why our normal software isn't working, because people in the area keep intermittently just losing the internet because of that storm in the infrastructure. But let's go to Mary Ellen on line 5. Mary Ellen, you're on Sekulow.
Oh, hello, fellas. I just want to say, well, first of all, I'm so happy Lemon was arrested, and this has taken that course, and I agree with all of that. However, I also listen to the left wingers, what they're saying, and I remember them saying, "Oh, well, we went in there after the service ended." And my question is, when did the service end? When did the pastor just stop teaching or preaching up at the pulpit, and I remember. At my own church, when we stay afterward for prayer time, That's a sacred time.
It's actually not that. We know what happened here, which was an interruption of a service. They will claim that it was not an interruption, that they just started to ask questions in the middle of the service as if that's a normal thing that happens in traditional church services. But we know that kind of after the time of worship,
right after the songs
music
period, and there was a prayer by the pastor, and that is then when they and the organizer admitted it, which I think was worse for her.
She was
we
like,
didn't barge in and start chanting. She stood up to interrupt the service.
Yeah,
which
asking
is
about a potential pastor who worked there who may have been working for ICE. And then I believe the pastor responded with something of "This is inappropriate. Please stop." And then chaos ensued.
And then they completely derailed the service. So
and that's where
even
you
their
see.
own words was, it was in the middle of the service, and we interrupted it for the purpose of interrupting it, which is whoever, by force or threat of force or by physical obstruction, intentionally injures, intimidates, or interferes with, or attempts to injure, intimidate, or interfere with any person lawfully exercising or seeking to exercise the First Amendment right of religious freedom at a place of religious worship. So the interference there is exactly what they admit to doing, which is a violation of the law. They went into the service and in the middle of it waited to do it. It wasn't even during the songs breaking in. And I do think it was remarkable almost to see the reaction of many of the people in that congregation. Obviously, a lot of them left, but that they responded to it not by getting in the face of the protesters. The security team, you can see, got there, but they started playing music, and many of them either started praying or worshiping. They combated this act of interruption by worshiping more. And I feel like that is the complete difference of when Don Lemon is saying, no, I worship anywhere I am. I'm not here to. The congregation continued to try and worship and be faithful on that Sunday morning when all of the other people were trying everything within their power to stop them from doing that.
Listen, we only got one segment left. I want you to be a part of the show today. I think we've opened up a couple lines, probably. 1-800-684-3110, 1-800-684-3110. When you hear something like the arrest of Don Lemon, former CNN anchor, of course it ties you back to CNN. And who are we currently in court with? CNN. Today is CNN's deadline to respond to what we feel like is a groundbreaking case, a cert petition in the United States Supreme Court. We're asking the justices to hear a case where we can finally get to some journalistic integrity even, where you're not allowed to just continually spew a lie, a knowing lie, something you know to be untrue, because you are quote-unquote protected. And that is what the ACLJ is in court in right now. So I encourage you to go to aclj.org. Support the work financially. We know mainstream media has some deep pockets, and we need your help. We could use your support. So go to aclj.org right now. We'll be back with your calls and comments. Last segment coming up.
Former CNN anchor Don Lemon is in police custody. This following the city's church protest in Minneapolis. Lemon is reportedly charged with conspiracy to deprive rights and with a violation of the FACE Act, interfering by force of someone's First Amendment rights.
The post from Attorney General Pam Bondi this morning. She writes, at my direction, early this morning, federal agents arrested Don Lemon, Traherne Jean Cruz, Georgia Fort, and Jamil Liddell Lundy in connection with the coordinated attack on City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota.
He's probably being charged, if I could guess, with conspiracy to violate the FACE Act.
In a statement, Don Lemon's attorney says, quote, this unprecedented attack on the First Amendment and transparent attempt to distract attention from the many crises facing this administration will not stand. Don will fight these charges vigorously and thoroughly in court.
Conspiracy to violate the FACE Act, and if he's convicted there, what penalty is he looking at?
Okay, conspiracy is an agreement to commit a crime amongst two or more people, one of whom takes a step in furtherance of the agreement. So if he agreed to commit the crime and then did nothing, but one of the others with whom he agreed took a step in furtherance, then he can be charged with conspiracy. 5 years. Conspiracy to commit the crime is generally the same punishment as the actual crime itself.
He knew exactly what they were doing. He helped them plan this and do it with them. He inserted himself as a protester. In my opinion, I don't think this is a personal vendetta at all. I think this is actually trying to protect these people who have a right to worship. The protester's First Amendment right does not trump the First Amendment right to religious practice, right? My right to scream doesn't trump that person's right to listen to their pastor give a sermon.
Welcome back to Sekulow. We are going to take as many calls as we can, so keep calling 1-800-684-3110. Will, who we got?
We got Mario on line 4. You're on Sekulow.
Yahoo!
How you doing, gentlemen?
Doing well.
I guess we're not going to be making any lemonade around this time. So, I mean, Don Lemon got exactly what he wanted. He wanted attention. Now he's got attention, but now he's got to suffer consequences. I believe that he went out on a limb for the rest of the journalists, thinking, you know how you bend a bar. I think he's breaking it to see how far he can go, and he's going to suffer consequences for that. But Don Lemon, he can't call himself a Christian. I'm a minister. I've been a minister 28 years, and we know how far we can go. We don't force things on people. We invite them. And what he did was he forced himself to cross over into somebody else's amendment and thinking he's right. And I think he pushed it. He broke the bar. He didn't bend it. He broke it. And he knew it. But he just kept doing it really nonchalant, thinking he's trying to be cute about it. And now he's going to suffer consequences for all the other journalists. And all the other journalists are like, well, no. You can't cross over into somebody else's First Amendment, which is what he did.
Yeah, I think you're right. Mario, it's a good word, cute about it. I think that is kind of true. When you listen to his tone and the way his personality kind of shines in this, when he says, to the pastor, I'm a Christian, I'm a worshiper, I'm always worshiping. There is a tinge of sarcasm through all of it. There's a tinge of sarcasm, or there's a tinge of dislike when he sees a child being comforted by his father or by his mother after they just went through a traumatic experience. And again, anyone who's been in a church recently, anyone who's been in your school even, movie theater, you know that the back of your mind, especially when you're a parent, is checking where the exits are, making sure you understand that where you're safe and where you're not safe. It's a sad state of reality, but it's where we're at. Don Lemon seemed to gloat and love in it. Now, I'll never question anyone's religious beliefs. Don Lemon says he's a Christian. I'm not someone who's going to be on here. I am not the judge and jury of someone's beliefs. He may very much practice a different form of Christianity than you practice, likely, but that is not for me to decide. That being said, there's the two big issues here that I have, and really sort of that third one, which is how far did he participate in this? Did he participate in the point where he got involved in the protest? How do we make that determination? I said, if he's chanting along with people, yeah, that's it. That's the line. That's so easy, and that is so clear. If he's just there and he's asking questions of the pastor and he went in with this group, I don't know if I personally know if that's a federal crime because I don't want that kind of same structure to then be playing back on conservative journalists or just independent journalists or, honestly, mainstream journalists.
We actually have an interesting call. I'm going to cut line a little bit here, but this is Linda calling from North Carolina on line 5. Linda, you're on Sekulow.
Good day. Hello, how's everyone?
Doing well. Go ahead.
That is great. Yes, I was listening to your show on the network that I watch, and just reading a little bit of it today. Of course, I didn't see the actual protest online. I just look at it from both sides. Being a born again believer and a follower of Jesus Christ, I just look at it I've heard the comments and the calls. I don't believe that is proper to go in and interrupt a church service for people that are there that genuinely love Jesus Christ, or maybe people that are unsaved and are going to be brought to Jesus Christ through some word, of course, through the Holy Spirit. However, I'm grateful that I live in a country where, and I study journalism, of course, and love journalism, love reading. I live in a country where I'm so grateful that I have freedom of speech. I see that, and I love that. I think as a reporter, of course, everything I've read, I don't see where he's made a statement about it. And I may not agree with maybe his personal lifestyle or something that someone would say, but I don't want to openly defame him. I don't think everything that I've watched, watching Lemon over the years, bits and pieces, I don't think that I think that he's like most Americans, even born-again believers and followers of Jesus Christ. I'm a part of that also. I'm tired. I'm tired of people saying things about something small. It's big, but it's small compared to a president that has said that years ago he could kill someone and hold a gun and nothing would happen to him, and just say things like,
look, I'm only cutting you off because we have 3 minutes left, and it's not exactly what you said you were talking about. I understand it, though. Look, you've heard my point of view on this. I have been saying a very different thing. Now, what I don't like that you kind of got there at the end, which is, well, Trump said this, so therefore Don Lemon can say this. I think we have messed up completely in that sort of game, where all of a sudden it's like, well, he said these words, so now I get to say these words. Tim Walz got to inflame the protesters. Now Donald Trump gets to inflame the ICE agents. No, I don't feel like we have to play that game anymore. We need to actually look through our own eyes, not through a political partisan eyes. We need to look through our own eyes and make a decision. Do I agree with anything that Don Lemon has said or will say or probably will ever say about this issue? No, I do not. Do I think that he potentially broke laws? I think we're going to find out. We're going to find out what they were, and we'll get to that. Do I think getting involved in just covering something and being an aggressive journalist is enough for that? I don't know. I would tend to say no, but that's not my decision to be made. I do want to push forward, though, this notion that we have to each meet up with each other's own angst or each other's own anger. Not in this world, because what happens is people end up dead on the streets, and we can't have that. When it happened a year ago to Lincoln Riley, or it happened a week ago in the protests that have happened.
I do want to get to one more call, but I have 2 quick updates. One, we now know the charges that Don Lemon has been charged with per the LA Times.
Oh, hello.
He is being charged with conspiracy to deprive rights and violation of the FACE Act. And interfering by force of someone's First Amendment rights. So these are the charges, according to a Justice Department spokesperson telling the LA Times. Also, interesting, in our Dershowitz versus CNN case, CNN has officially waived their right to respond to our cert petition, which is interesting, meaning they are not putting up a defense of why the Supreme Court should not take it in at this stage of the game. Now, does that because they believe that it's not going anywhere? Maybe. Is it because they are just fine with it moving on and want to try to impact case law? We don't know that. But it is a very interesting development today as we continue to fight in court.
Maybe their own lawyers like, about time. I don't think so. I don't think that's the case.
Let's try really quickly to get to Suzanne on line 2, calling from Maryland. Suzanne, you got about 30 seconds, but you're on Sekulow.
Okay, the FACE Act provides protection for church and synagogues as sanctuary holy places standing for life. Abortion surgery rooms are sanctuaries protected by the FACE Act standing for death. Are we saying that the media should have equal access to both churches, synagogues, sanctuaries, and to surgery rooms where these abortions are being performed?
Well, I mean, that is one of the reasons why he is being charged. I also believe that if it were a conservative journalist going in with protesters into a abortion center, they would probably get charged as well.
For sure.
But the old saying that has been on this by your dad for a long time is that the left worships at the altar of abortion. That is how they got the FACE Act to pass. The left and their worship centers were protected by the FACE Act, and the right, that's the only way they got it.
You know, well, I saw one comment that came in and said, you said Don Lemon has the best attorneys in the country, but I always say the ACLJ has the best attorneys in the country.
I said one of the best attorneys in the country.
So you know what? Support the work of the ACLJ. Not what Will said. ACLJ.org.